Hey, what is going on, guys? Over at Stealth here, and in today's video we're going to be breaking down the complete tier list for every single role for patch 10.4. So if we start off in the top lane here, a bunch of different champions getting changed. Let's first talk about Sona and Soraka because they're getting some pretty big nerfs in this patch, but the way that Riot's nerfing them just doesn't really make a ton of sense. It does make sense for Sona, like the Sona nerfs are pretty good. It's going to affect top lane Sona, but not affect support Sona at all. The changes to Soraka though, they just don't make any sense at all because these changes are more so going to hurt support Soraka than they are going to hurt top lane Soraka. When you keep in mind that these champions have like 57% win rates right now in this patch, even with the nerfs they're receiving, it's probably only going to drop those win rates down to like 54%. So they're still going to remain S tier picks, even though the nerfs they are getting are pretty big. With the Soraka changes, they ended up nerfing the heal you get from hitting your Q, the move speed you get, and they also nerfed the mana cost. They did not hit the damage, they did not hit the cooldown at all on that ability, so she's still going to remain a pretty solid top lane pick. Yes, she's going to get weaker, and yes, your win rate's going to drop a couple percent, but like I said, considering she's sitting at a 57% win rate in this patch right now, it's not really going to bring her down that much. Now, Garen's getting a couple different pretty nice buffs in this patch here. He's getting a buff to his Q scaling damage. He's getting a buff to his W to where it's now going to increase his bonus armor and MR by 10% when you hit max stacks on that. And your shield amount is being changed from 10% of your max health just to a base amount. And now it's going to scale off of your bonus health. So what this basically means is that your shielding from Garen W is going to be stronger in the early game. Once you get a ton of health on the champion, then it's probably going to be a little bit weaker later on in the game, but this is more so going to be a buff in my opinion because it's going to help him out a little bit more in the laning phase. So for low elo, Garen is definitely moving back up into S tier for this patch. I do think that for higher elos, he could still remain like an A/S tier pick, but for the majority of elos, Garen will now be an S tier pick in patch 10.4. And then for a couple other champions getting some smaller changes in this patch, Gnar's getting a buff to his move speed in Mega Gnar by 10. He's getting an 80 ratio increase on his Mega Gnar ultimate as well. So small changes to Gnar. I think that in previous patches, he was like a C/B tier pick. So with these changes in this patch here, I'm just going to bump him up into B tier now for 10.4. Now for Jace, he's actually getting some pretty nice changes. Base damage is being increased on his Q by 10 at rank 1. Once you get it maxed out, it's being increased by, I'm pretty sure, 25. So it's actually a pretty nice buff to Jace here for 10.4. Considering he is doing very poorly though in solo queue right now in 10.3, he's just not the greatest top lane pick. It's only going to bump him up into B tier. I don't think it's going to be enough of a change to bump him up into A tier. And then if we move on to the jungle now, this is where things get pretty interesting here. So Riot's giving a bunch of different champions the ability to now jungle for 10.4. So champions that weren't really seen as junglers before are now going to be able to deal more damage to jungle camps. So they're now going to be a little bit more viable inside of the jungle. These champions include Diana, Darius, Talon, Mordekaiser, Gnar, Garen, and Zed. So take my ratings for those champions with a grain of salt here for this patch. It's going to take us at least until next patch to really be able to understand how strong these champions are in the jungle and have an exact spot for them on the tier list. But my initial rankings of these champions for 10.4 is going to be at max B tier. So I just don't see the champions here getting these changes, being very strong in the jungle. When you take Garen, for example, like yes, he's going to have decent clear in the jungle, but how is this champion going to gank? Like he doesn't have a CC ability in his kit, he doesn't have a gap closer in his kit, like his ganks are just going to be so lackluster throughout the early game. So I'm placing him in C tier to start off the patch here. Same thing for Gnar there. Like I could see Gnar being a little bit better, but if you're going up against like a strong early game jungler, I just feel like his ability to duel them is going to be really weak. Zed, same thing as well there, doesn't really have the best gank potential throughout the early game. If there's one champion that could end up being pretty good, that could even be an A tier, it'd probably be Talon, just because of the fact that you can jump over walls with this champion that allows you to gank pretty effectively throughout the early game. So I could see Talon being a decent pick, and he's probably going to end up being the best pick out of all the champions that are getting these changes. And then same thing there for Mordekaiser and Darius. Like their clears aren't going to be bad in the jungle. That's not going to be the issue with these champions by any means. I think their clears are going to be pretty solid, but just their ability to either duel in the early game, their ability to actually pull off successful ganks is just going to be a lot weaker than most other jungle picks. And then if we just run down some of the changes to the S and the A tier for this patch, Shyvana, Trundle, and Kha'Zix are all going to be bumping up into S tier. So Shyvana and Trundle especially really good picks for solo queue right now. They got direct changes a couple patches ago. Those changes have slowly but surely been making them stronger over the past few patches here. And I just think that all those champions like Kha'Zix, Shyvana, Trundle, really good objective control throughout the early game, can very easily solo out those dragons. With the Shyvana and Trundle, very easy to execute champions. You can pick them up right away and you can start having a ton of success with them. I like the Shyvana especially right now for the lower elos because she's basically the perfect pick. People aren't going to expect you to solo out those early dragons. You're going to find yourself just getting to that Dragon Soul win condition very easily with the Shyvana pick. You can either go for AD or AP as well with this champion too, so she's a really good blind pick. You never need to worry about your team like having too much AP or having too much AD because you can always look to itemize depending on the situation with this champion. And then for A tier, there are not too many changes overall. Amumu is going to be moving up into A tier for this patch though. He did get a couple different changes, got a buff to his Q, got a buff to his ultimate cooldown, so those changes make him at least an A tier pick for the lower elos. Higher elos, he still probably remains like an A/B tier pick, but for the lower elos, he's definitely an A tier pick now for 10.4. And if we take a look at the mid lane now, really small changes for mid lane in this patch. Aurelion Sol and Lux are the only two champions that are getting any kind of notable changes in this patch, but it's not going to change their placing on the tier list. They're still both going to remain A tier champions. I'm going to move Echo up into S tier for this patch though, just do a little bit of adjusting on the tier list. He's been a borderline S tier pick in the mid lane for the past couple patches here. I think with the Diana nerfs in last patch, with the Rumble nerfs, with the Cassin nerfs a little while back, with the Kali getting nerfed as well, a lot of his harder matchups have been getting weaker in the previous patches here, so that does help him out. He still does have some pretty bad matchups in the mid lane, like he's not the greatest blind pick, but I think overall for solo queue, if you can get past your weaker early game on Echo, hit your mid game spike, it's one of the strongest for any champions in the game, and you can just start to take over games once you hit your spike on Echo. So yeah, really nothing else to say about the mid lane in this patch here. Whatever you were playing in last patch, whatever you were spamming or having success with, you can still play in this upcoming patch, and it's still going to be very good for you to climb with in solo queue. So moving over to AD carry now, also similar to the mid lane, not a ton of changes in this patch. I don't think there was a single AD carry that got a direct change in 10.4. Just a bit of adjusting though to the tier list. Ezreal, I'm going to move up into A tier now. After the changes in last patch, he is doing much better. People are also now understanding like how to build this champion better in solo queue now. A lot of people are going for the Manamune Trinity Force build instead of going for Iceborne Gauntlet. People are not going for the AP variant builds on Ezreal anymore either. They're going back to Blade of the Ruined King. So because of that and because of the direct changes, he is performing much better in solo queue. I'm not going to put him in S tier though. I still think he's a champion that is really reliant on the player playing him as to how strong he is. Like if you cannot play Ezreal at a decent level, he's just not going to be worth picking up for solo queue. So you definitely do need to have your games on this champion in order for you to make him work. And then Vayne's going to be moving up into S tier. She has been getting some changes in the past couple patches here that have indirectly made her stronger. So the way the support meta is kind of shifting right now, we've seen Nautilus along with Leona both getting nerfed. So those champions have gotten weaker the past couple patches. We've seen Lulu getting buffed. We've seen Sona getting buffed, Karma getting buffed. These champions that do very well with Vayne, that have the ability to help her get past her weaker early game, help her scale into her mid game spike really nicely. These more so enchanter supports tend to do better with Vayne. So because of that, because they're getting buffed and because they're being played more, Vayne is doing much better in solo queue now. The only AD carry getting a direct buff in this patch, I'm pretty sure, is Caitlyn, whose bonus attack speed at level 1 is being increased from 10% up to 20%. So will this be enough to bump her back up into S tier? I don't think so. She's going to be a borderline S tier pick for this patch here. And ever since the changes to Stormrazor and to Cloak of Agility a couple patches ago, she has been performing a little bit weaker in solo queue. So this change is nice, but she's still going to remain in A tier, a pretty solid AD carry pick for 10.4. Alright, so lastly here to round out the video, down in the support role, a couple different changes here. So Soraka is going to be moving out of S tier down into A tier. Like I said earlier on in the video, those changes she got are more so going to affect her in the support role, like especially the changes to her Q there. She did get a change to her W to where it is going to be like sort of a buff to support Soraka, but I think overall the net outcome of the changes that she's getting is going to end up with her getting nerfed for support. So I do expect her to be an A tier pick now for 10.4. And then for Lux in this patch, she got a couple different changes to her Qs. So the cooldown ended up being lowered, the base damage ended up being increased, and it's going to be enough to bump her up into A tier in my opinion. She was performing pretty weak in solo queue the past couple patches, which is why she was in B tier, but in this patch now, she's going to be a pretty solid support pick. Nothing insane or anything. She's not going to be one of the best supports you can play, but she is now going to be at least a pretty strong pick you can play in solo queue. And then Yuumi is finally going to be moving out of the gutter from C tier into B tier for 10.4. She's getting another change in this patch to her E. The healing on that is being increased. So with all the changes she's gotten over the past couple patches here, it's going to be enough to finally move her out of C tier. But I still think that overall, she is going to be one of the weaker supports for solo queue. Alright, so that's going to be it for the video, guys. Pretty light patch overall, not too many super big meta shifting changes, but I think that the jungle is the one role to definitely watch out for in 10.4. With those new champions now being able to be played in the jungle, it's going to be interesting to see how strong they are. Like I said, I don't think they're going to be super good picks, but I could be completely wrong. They could end up being like pretty decent picks for solo queue, so we'll have to wait and see until next patch, get at least a patch of like data to see how good those champions actually really are. But with that being said, guys, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.